So ADA ended up tapping into this range that I set up previously between 41 cents to 43 cents. And within this brief to the upside, we ended up having a five-way structure form, which usually signals that we are on an uptrend. And as it stands right now, we are seeing this correction where we are currently finding support at the 200-day EMA level. And looking at the stochastic RSI, we are within the oversold conditions. So I'm looking at for the bulls to regain momentum. And should that be the case, the 50 EMA will be one to be keeping an eye on. And if it just so happens that we get rejected at the 50 EMA, that could signal that we are bearish and we could see a deeper move to the downside. However, if we were to break above the 50 EMA, that could signal that we are bullish. And it will be a case of whether or not we end up exceeding this range, whilst at the same time exceeding the local top, which would then also confirm that we are on a bullish trend. And so, yeah, given that we had this five-way structure play out and we find ourselves within a correction, usually that correction would retrace anywhere between the 50 to 18.2% retracement level. And that region sits between 38.69 cents to 40.44 cents. And so here you can see that we ended up tapping into that range. And so it is possible that we ended up forming this correction and then we see a reversal. But at the same time, it is possible that we could see a deeper move within this range. And within this correction, it looks like what ended up forming was a double XR structure. Like so. And so what I do is check to see if the Y wave ended up tapping into its typical range between 1 to 1.236 of the W wave. So if I bring in the fib tool and bring this to 42.41 cents. And so here you can see that we ended up exceeding the typical range for the Y wave, and we failed to retrace towards the 1.6 level, which could be a good thing. And so, yeah, for as long as we don't retrace towards this level, it's possible that we ended up forming this double XR structure. And if it just so happens that we do retrace towards the 1.6 level, that could then signal that we're bearish, because that could trigger a five-way structure. So we could see a deep move to the downside. And if it just so happens that we ended up bottoming out at 39.92 cents, one of two things could play out following the completion of this double XR structure, where we could either get rejected within this zone between the 50 to 18.2% retracement level, and should that be the case, that would then signal that what we are forming is a deeper correction to the downside, made up of a bigger WXY structure. And if we just so happen to exceed that zone, that would then signal that we're bullish, and we could see the price of ADA then breach above the local top. So if I zoom out and go in the 4-hour chart, you can see that the bears have the momentum, but they are losing that momentum. And we find ourselves finding support at the 50 EMA level. And on the 8-hour chart, the bears also have the momentum, and it is possible that we could even retest the 50 EMA, which as it stands sits at 39.38 cents. And so even if we were to go deeper than 39.92 cents and find support at this level, we can still remain bullish for as long as the price of ADA finds support within this region. And if it just so happens that we do find support within this region, one of two things could be playing out within the next move to the upside, where we could either have a bigger WXY structure form where we could even retest the 200 EMA level, or best case scenario, we could have a five-way structure form with this being wave 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if we lose this region and go even deeper, that would then confirm that we are bearish, and we could see a deeper correction form made up of a bigger WXY structure. And should that be the case, the price of ADA will then have the potential to reach anywhere within that 1 to 1.236 level. And that region sits between 35.83 cents to 37.14 cents. Now, this won't necessarily be a bad thing, given that we did have this impulsive move play out. And so, yeah, again, usually whenever you have an impulsive move that plays out, that signals that we are on an uptrend. And given that we ended up having this move to the upside form, it looks like ADA currently finds itself in a correction, which again would typically retrace anywhere between 50 to 18.2%. And so if we were to tap into this range, that still sits within this bigger zone here. And so if we find support within this bigger target between 50 to 18.2%, we can still remain bullish. And again, it will be a case of whether or not what we are forming is either a bigger WXY structure to the upside or a five-wave move. But of course, that's something that I'm going to be looking out for in the days and weeks to come, and I will keep you guys updated.